August 2023. Today, my name is Rosie and I'm interviewing Janet Smith about her grandmother's time at Blackrod. What is your name?
My name is Janet Smith.
What is your link to the school?
Well, I've come this morning because my grandma came to teach at this school when it very, very first opened, probably in 1939. I'm not sure of the date exactly, but I know that they were building in 38, so probably 1939 when it was opened, but she first came here as it opened. So, but she'd previously taught at the parish church school at the top of the village. In fact, she taught there all her life, so.
When did your mum work at Blackrod Secondary School?
Oh, it was my grandma, and she worked here between 1939. I'm not exactly sure when she finished. I suspect it was probably about 1945 or 46. But if your teachers have got a record of staff working here, she was replaced by a lady called Mrs. Paul, who lived just up on Station Road, and Mrs. Paul worked here for the rest of her life, I think. So she was here a long, long time. So a lot of people remember Mrs. Paul because, you know, they're still alive today, whereas most people that my grandma taught have now died. So.
How old were you when your grandmother taught?
I wasn't even born. I was born in 1946, so I think my grandma probably finished working because my grandpa, who was married to my grandma, they built the bungalow stores at the Green Barn as a shop. My grandpa had a brainwave that my mother could run this shop. I'm not sure that she was as keen as he was because she was at Rivington at the time and expecting to do something perhaps a little bit higher standard of job. But he decided if she ran this shop, she could look after him while my grandma carried on teaching. I think that was the ulterior motive. But that was just a bungalow stores, was just a lock-up shop originally when they first built it, and then they built the bedrooms round it later. So she ran the shop, and of course children from this school would call there if they had enough coupons, because it was the war years, to get sweets. So she remembers having lots of jars of sweets and tins of toffee, of which I've still got some of the empties. Well, I've passed them on to my cousin actually, but I had a big tin with Nuttall's Mintos on that was gold coloured, that was about that big, and I used to keep all my flour in it at one time. That was when I baked quite a lot of cakes. I don't do that as much now. Okay.
What subject did your grandma teach?
Well, her favourite subject of all and her main teaching job was mathematics, which you'd call maths, or sums, would they, or arithmetic. Well, anyway, that was her main subject. But don't forget, in a primary school, teachers have to be really clever. They have to be able to teach all subjects. So she'd been used to teaching everything, history, English, everything, and she was very, very good at her knowledge was very good. She liked reading a lot, and she was quite an intelligent lady. So she did teach all subjects, and of course in those days most children stayed at school till they were about 14, and then they had to go and work. They worked in the pits and down the mines, they worked in factories, so they didn't stay at school like they do now till they're 18. Most of them left when they were about 14. So a lot of children stayed at the same school. I rather suspect that was the case then. And opening a senior school, as it was called then, designed for 11 to 16s, was quite something new, wasn't it? So possibly a lot of those children had to leave when they were 14 because the parents couldn't afford for them to stay at school. I don't know. But I think possibly the transition for her wasn't be as difficult as it would for a primary school teacher now to go into a secondary school, a comprehensive school, and teach a certain subject, which you need to be a lot more knowledgeable in. And actually, if you look at just maths alone and arithmetic and all the things that go with arithmetic, it's very different than it was back in 1940s, even 50s and 60s when I was at school. If I used to look at my children's maths books, they were quite different from when I'd been at school. The way you do things was different. So I bet your parents even say that, do they? Yeah.
When did your mum leave Blackrod?
My grandma left Blackrod in about 1946. I don't know exactly, 45, 46, because I was born in 46. I suspect that when my mother was having me, she wouldn't be able to stay at the shop. Possibly she left to take over, although they did sell the shop. But my mother kept working there till I was about 3 or 4. But we lived in Horwich, and she had to bring me up in a pram every day from Horwich and walk up that hill with a pram, can you imagine? And then walk back again at the end of the day. It must have been not easy, work all day, but she did.
My name is Archie. What surrounded the school when your grandma taught here?
Can you just excuse me and I'll just switch that off? Sorry about that, I should have switched it off before. Oh dear.
Tidy, you can edit both of them out then. Yeah.
Just, sorry about that. I don't know what it was either. It stopped anyway.
You introduce yourself again, Archie, and then I'll just cut.
Sorry.
My name is Archie. What surrounded the school when your grandma taught here?
Well, when my grandma taught here was a long, long time ago, so don't forget, Blackrod was a village. It was a mining village with lots of pits and lots of pubs, and not a lot else, only little cottages. Anyway, there wouldn't be any of the Green Barn estate, Limbridge Drive, Shoreby Close, none of those houses existed. None of Meadoway Highfield existed, although my grandpa decided he wanted to build some houses on there, but he was refused the planning permission, so he wasn't allowed to build. So there were no houses there. I remember that my mother's uncle, built a bungalow here next to the youth club. Now I remember that when I was very, very young, so possibly that was in the 40s when he built that bungalow, or probably 50. But none of the houses between here and the Green Barn, or what was the Green Barn pub, do you remember that, any of you? Before they built the houses there.
We've looked at some maps.
You've looked at that
on the map.
Well, there was just the Green Barn pub, which was a very old pub, and then the bungalow stores, which my grandpa had built, so that was definitely already built. The houses on Station Road had been built then, but none of the modern estates had been built. None of the ones behind the church and Nightingale and Coniston, all those, none of those houses existed. But there were odd little pockets with little cottages in. And of course there was the old cottages on the main road and what would have been a mill and the mill cottages. But it very much was a village in those days.
What was one of her main memories of Blackrod?
Of Blackrod, or of the school? Of the school, do you mean?
Yeah.
Or she loved being in Blackrod. She was very involved. She was on the church council. She loved teaching here. She loved teaching at the church school. And she kept in touch with many, many people. In fact, when I moved to Blackrod, it's 50 or over 50 years ago when I moved back to Blackrod, and people used to meet me in the streets and say, because in those days, if you weren't born here, you couldn't be called a Blackrodian. You had to be born here. And everybody knew everybody else and everybody's family. And I remember coming to live here and people stopped me in the street. Are you Mrs. Hill's granddaughter? Your grandma used to teach me. She was strict, you know, and they used to tell me all the things that she did. Because one of the things she did here, she acted as the head teacher for a spell. The man who was the head teacher was called Mr. Beavers, and he got a job whilst he was here as a director of education on the Wirral. The Wirral is an area near to Liverpool, but is not joined by land, and you have to go through the Mersey Tunnel to get to the Wirral. Very interesting little area. And he went to be director of education there. So I think that must have been because of the war, and there wouldn't be any men, or very many men spare to apply for jobs teaching. So he'd gone, and so she was acting head. And the other things I remember was my mother, although she didn't come to this school, she used to volunteer, and as did a lot of the families of teachers here, to fire watch. And they went up in the roof area somewhere to fire watch. Does anybody know why they would be fire watching? Go on, love. Sorry?
From the fire. The fire watching.
Fire. Why do you think? Anybody any ideas? What years were we talking about? What was happening?
Yeah, you're right. War years. So why would they need to fire watch? And how would fire start?
Yeah, they were watching for the bombs dropping. And fortunately, for us, because it's fairly rural and there's no big towns near us, really big towns, there weren't many bombs that dropped in this area. I do remember one on Lever Park Avenue in Horwich, which is the road to Rivington. There was a famous incident there, but I don't ever remember any major incidents for Blackrod or other areas of Horwich, because the Germans wanted to bomb the cities and the ports. And so from here, you had a very good view of a good area from the roof. And my mother used to watch them bombing in Liverpool. And she was on duty when the night that they dropped a lot of bombs on Liverpool, and it was all ablaze and they could see all the fires. But they did that every night of every week, of every month, all during the war. They had rotas of people. So my mother, members of the school staff, their relatives, all helped with fire watching.
What did your your grandmother enjoy about working here?
She just loved being here. She loved her job. She loved teaching. She loved getting her knowledge across. I think she just got a lot of satisfaction, as a lot of teachers do. They love seeing the progression of students to coming in, not being able to do anything, and go out with lots and lots of good skills.
What was your grandma's favourite thing to teach at Blackrod?
She liked maths the best, I think. I think maths was her favourite subject.
Why did you want to be involved in the Heritage Hunters project?
Well, I've lived in the village for a long, long time, over 50 years. I know it meant a lot to my mum, because my mum also worked here, and my children came here. So it was a very special place. My children, lots of productions here. In fact, my youngest son was in a production that Mrs. Robinson masterminded of, I think the first ones were the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. My youngest son is extremely small, and when he was first started school, he was very tiny, and so he was dopey, the dopey dwarf, and he walked slower than anybody else, and it was really quite fun, that production. And I can remember it vividly, and all these children being munchkins, and they were super. They put a production on every year of something. In fact, I did the makeup for one show that they did, and they did Chitty Bang Bang, and the girl who has the rosy cheeks made up like a doll, and she has to do this, you know. I did all the makeup for all them. Yeah, I've done lots of things. My mother was a dinner lady here because she used to come and collect my children from school and bring them down when I was working. So, you know, she had great friends here, and when she left here, all the dinner ladies came to a party at our house, and I did a buffet, and I knew lots and lots of them. So it was almost a family, really. It carried on. So